Survivor Legends, we have the leader of the Black Widow Brigade, Parvati Shallow, the ultimate Survivor flirt. And we have the Queen of Survivor, Sandra Diaz-Twine, the originator of the anyone but me Survivor strategy. Both regularly discussed as members of the Mount Rushmore of Survivor. However, there's always been a fascinating debate throughout the Survivor community if you are Team Parvati or Team Sandra. 100% there is a difference between being a strong Survivor player and a strong Survivor winner, as both Sandra and Parvati really grew into their own during their second season. And with the recent fighting on social media, it begs the question, who is the better Survivor player and at the same time better Survivor winner? We are getting far too ahead of ourselves and we'll be answering that question throughout the video, but we first need to take a quick step back to the very beginning. With this video taking place literally 13 years after the events of Survivor Heroes vs Villains, and how our two players up for discussion never interacted in Survivor Winners at War, the fighting, the beef, the drama between Sandra and Parvati all began online with a simple Facebook post by user Maddie Chance, who was confused about the outcome of Survivor Heroes vs Villains. Literally, why did Sandra win Heroes vs Villains over Parvati? With over 400 comments and 100 likes later, this user would make an update saying, "I hope all y'all who praise Sandra's win also support Ali Gabler's win. Also, I'm sorry for all the drama." As this user would quickly come to find out, this was a catalyst and jumping off point for Survivor's civil war between Sandra Diaz-Twine and Parvati Shallow. Sandra would take the first shot in this battle, replying directly to Maddie Chance's post with saying, "It's simple, I was there. Because the jury hated both Russell and Parvati, under no circumstance would Parvati have ever won Heroes vs Villains." And while the Queen would end her post with the classic "Queen stays Queen" line, this would then start complete mayhem online within the Survivor community. On Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, and YouTube, it felt like no one could stop talking about this drama, as everyone was drawing the line in the sand if they were Team Sandra or Team Parvati. And although this debate, the civil war, had not officially begun, it was about to, as Sandra would add fuel to the fire and respond to the post again the following morning. "I see I'm still the topic of conversation. For those that constantly defend me and show love, I appreciate you. And for those Parvati lovers out there, go spend 2 hours on Survivor with her and see how much you like her then. She is not that nice." However, Sandra's response was nothing compared to Parvati's, as after this user shares the post on Instagram stories and tags Parvati, she decides to clap back. "Call me anything, but please don't call me nice. Nice girls don't win Survivor or build lives they love. Sandra, you can keep my name in your mouth to stay relevant. I ain't mad at ya, and thanks for the compliment." Parvati's post was somewhat unexpected, however, a 2-second glance at the drama is more than enough to predict previous Survivor players were already gearing up to pick sides of either Team Parvati or Team Sandra. In the most notable case on Twitter, Tyson simply comes out supporting Team Parvati with the word "Parv," as Russell decides on Team Sandra in a response to Tyson's tweet saying "not Parv." To watch this unfold was truly game-changing during the tough days of the Survivor off-season, waiting any news between Survivor 43 and Survivor 44. As RHAP leader Rob Sesternino wanted to make a podcast about the events, I volunteered to moderate the 2023 Survivor Peace Summit, and top-tier negotiator from Survivor David vs Goliath, Angelina, offered to co-moderate and be Rob's partner in crime. Social media drama is always fun to witness, but this still doesn't answer the question on who is the better Survivor player, as when you actually sit down and crunch the numbers, and don't worry, I've literally crunched all the numbers, it's insane to see the Survivor resumes that both these legends have built up. Only counting US Survivor, they've both competed in 4 seasons and over 100 days each, where Parvati was the first person to win the same challenge twice and the first person to play 2 idols at the same tribal council, and Sandra was the first person to win Survivor and not win any challenges, and the first 2-time Survivor winner, making her arguably the queen. Let's take a deep dive into the specific seasons and decide once and for all who is the superior Survivor player. Sandra Diaz-Twine would start her Survivor journey at 28 years old in the 7th season Survivor Pearl Islands, aligning with fan favorite player Rupert and needing to try to not lose her temper on infamous Grandma Lion Johnny Fairplay. In fact, Sandra's loud and blunt personality would result in a lot of heated arguments.
You know what? I can get loud too. What the f? I can get loud too.
I don't want to argue with you.
Sandra would be in trouble later in the game after Rupert was voted out, and this is where she would develop her anyone but me strategy, offering herself up as a number in other players' gameplay. Sandra would place clever lies along the way, having her closest alliance Krista take the fall for something Sandra did. On the flip side of things, Parvati's first Survivor experience wouldn't go as well in the 13th season, Cook Island. Mostly being remembered in the season for being a huge flirt, Parvati would be part of several different alliances and survive a tribe swap. However, would eventually be on the wrong side of history at the merge, as the underdog I-24 containing players like Ozzy and Yule would eventually take over the game.
I don't know if Parvati is flirting with Ozzy only because she's hoping that there might be some strategic option there. Ozzy, to some extent, might be reciprocating.
Although Sandra's first attempt at Survivor would lead to a winning game and Parvati's would lead to a 6th place finish, they both would ultimately end up feeling fairly similar. 100% a winning game is going to come across more impressive for Sandra over Parvati, but both players would come across underwhelming as the community would scratch their heads at why they both would be invited back to play again.
Come on out, Parvati from Survivor Cook Island.
Obviously, the Survivor casting team saw something that the fans didn't, as Parvati would return in Survivor Micronesia Fans vs Favorites and completely change the game forever. The 16th season saw 10 returning players fight against 10 fans of the game, and Parvati had something to prove. Only really being remembered as a flirt the first time around, she wanted to play the game differently. Still creating a duo with the biggest dude out there, James, Parvati had added complexity this time around, making bonds with all the women she could. Pulling in some of the fans after a swap, this was key to Parvati's game as she would really come into her own at the merge, forming the Black Widow Brigade with herself, Alexis, Amanda, Sari, and Natalie, pulling off a string of insane Survivor blindsides that no one had ever seen before, even finding a hidden idol off camera that she decides not to keep as she didn't need it.
Ozzy, the tribe has spoken. Jason, the tribe has spoken. Alexis, the tribe has spoken. Eric, the tribe has spoken.
Now that Sandra and Parvati are on fairly even ground, both winning a season of Survivor, it was time for them to play their first season together in the 20th anniversary season Survivor Heroes vs Villains. And taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, it's exactly this moment in time that would start the online beef, as user Maddie Chance made that original post regarding the controversial ending to the season. For most of the season, Sandra hid in the background with her anyone but me strategy, as she goes under the radar in a season full of Survivor legends like Boston Rob, Candace Cody, and now Parvati Shallow with a massive target after her previous victory. With that said, Sandra did maneuver through some of the votes, placing the blame and eventually voting out Coach.
Russell's so stupid. He ate that crap up. I'm telling you, he's like, oh my god, I can't trust him.
Sandra would certainly play another low-key game of Survivor, but Parvati would do the exact opposite, getting Russell to play an idol for her during a crucial early part of the game to blindside Tyson, pulling off an insane double idol play at the merge, making it all the way to the end of the game while also being the player most named by the other castaways as the biggest threat they wanted to go during the preseason. Put simply, it's nearly impossible to analyze the second games of both Parvati and Sandra, as they are as polar opposite as you can possibly get. In Fans vs Favorites, we had Parvati begin to carve her legacy as a Survivor legend, as for like the next 20 seasons to follow, any younger girl going into the game talked about wanting to be the next Parvati in Survivor. That's the definition of a Survivor legend. But on the other side of things, you can't help but put some respect on Sandra's name for doing the impossible and becoming the first two-time winner of Survivor. And without winners at war, probably the only two-time winner we ever see. Sandra improves her legacy for simply winning the game again, whereas Parvati improves her legacy for how she won the game. One thing both Sandra and Parvati both have in common is during Heroes vs Villains, they both defeated Russell Hantz, as he became the 0 vote finalist. While I'm trying to defeat Russell Hantz as well on YouTube and gain more subscribers than him, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider subscribing and helping me pass Russell Hantz. To put it short and sweet, Sandra would enter Survivor for the third time during its 34th season, infamously titled Game Changers. At this point, Sandra had nothing left to prove, being the only two-time Survivor winner up until that point, but for some reason, people still held it against her for the lack of intent intense Survivor strategy. That was going to change this time around, playing the game from the front, announcing herself as the Queen of Survivor, creating a powerful alliance, and being sneaky with framing JT with stealing the tribe's sugar.
The only other person here that uses the sugar is JT and Michaela. So I knew JT would blame Michaela for the sugar jar being empty.
Ultimately, Sandra's journey would be cut short as she was voted out for the first time on day 16 after getting swap screwed. Although some consider this Sandra's most impressive Survivor experience in terms of playing from the front strategically, it's also the biggest separation of games between Sandra and Parvati, as Parvati's third game in Heroes vs Villains is the only comparison I would argue to be clearly more dominant in favor of Parvati. But we can't stop there, as both Sandra and Parvati would play Survivor for a fourth and final time during the 40th anniversary season, Survivor Winners at War. Both players would start the game on opposing tribes and both be gifted an advantage from the edge of extinction. Due to a double tribal council on day 16, both Sandra and Parvati were voted out during the same episode. Parvati would ultimately be swap screwed without any options, but Sandra's demise was playing the game too hard with trying to trade a hidden immunity idol for a fire token with Denise. It's tough to say who truly is the better Survivor legend and Survivor winner, as it can't be denied how fun it was watching the drama play out on social media. Call it a conspiracy theory, possibly hyping up Sandra versus Parvati in a future season. Whatever the case may be, I'll leave it up to you to decide who you think should be considered a greater Survivor player.